My Nerd World.
Where's the revolution? Come on, people, you're letting me down. Where's the revolution? Come on, people, you're letting me down.
Welcome to episode number 4 of Depeche Mode, the podcast. I am your host, Jon Justice. Man, the guys in DM are so cool. I'm looking at there's a new photo that just came out the other day. And, you know, it's just the three of them standing in front of essentially a brick wall wearing all black. But they just, through every album release, they always just have this great style to them. And it's almost timeless. It's different now. And you got to get, obviously you got to go, and I would probably start with the Music for the Masses era. Maybe go back to Some Great Reward. But, you know, Music for the Masses, they really did begin to, and then into Violator, they really did come into their own on a visual level, you know, mostly due to Anton Corbijn, and talked about this in previous episodes, but it mostly had to do with his style and what he brought to the band that was really an extension of how they were all already individually presenting themselves. But I'm just looking at this photograph, and they still just look as badass as they always have. Really looking forward to the show this week. I'll tell you what we have in store. I'm going to start off kind of becoming the trend now, sharing a personal story about DM, and with that also we'll get into later in the podcast the last few releases and the songs that have meant the most to me. And I've whittled it down. I realized going back and listening to episode 3 that I kind of was all over the map in mentioning the songs that I liked. So I've made a short list here from Ultra to Delta Machine of sort of in handpicking just a few songs off of those albums that really meant the most to me. Then I'm going to run through a review of Spirit. Now I haven't heard the album yet, and just as excited as you are to listen to it, but the embargo on the reviews has lifted. And many people, including many people on the DM, the Depeche-Mode.com website on the forum, have heard the record. And I have one particular translated review here, and I believe this came from a French publication. So I'll run through some of the points from this review. And I chose this one specifically because all of them seem to be tapping into something very similar, and this one's fairly straightforward as to the style of every single song. And I'll save it for the end of the podcast if you are a fan that really wants to go in with completely fresh ears without hearing any other perspectives. I was actually reading online on a forum earlier today that there was somebody that had not listened to Where's the Revolution yet. And they were waiting for the album. Like, man, you are a stronger individual than I am. But they wanted to hear, you know, the album all together, including the first single, on a first listen, rather than doing what normally happens. And I know this happens for me, and that is I spend so much time with the first single, except for Heaven, because I didn't care for that song. But I spend so much time with the first single that when I get to listening to the record, I've kind of burnt out a little bit on the first single, so I end up kind of skipping it on listens. So, again, I admire the person who is able to hold off to hear everything fresh. And maybe I would have done that if I had thought about it beforehand, but I was so desperate to hear what the new material sounded like that I didn't bother waiting. So that'll be at the end of the show. I want to start here, and I want to start with a suggestion to you, my fellow Depeche Mode fan. If you haven't spent time listening to a particular album in a long time, And again, this is coming from personal experience. This is coming from how I absorb, how I take in the music. But if you haven't spent a lot of time on, say, a particular record, maybe you didn't like it, maybe it didn't reach out and grab you, maybe just over time it was one of the ones that didn't stick, I would really encourage you to, pull it out, put it in your iTunes playlist, grab the CD, and give it a listen again. And I only mention this from personal experience. And before I get to my particular story, let me describe to you how I end up going, the cycles that I go through on a new Depeche Mode record. And the band has sort of laid out a plan that I follow, that I think we all kind of follow, but I'll tell you how it affects me. So, normally we get like an album announcement. We know that they're going into the studio and working on a new record, and we don't really get much. We don't get many details, and usually it's the producer that ends up being the first piece of the puzzle, and gives us sort of the first idea of what the album may or may not sound like. Now, it's been a little different with Ben Hillier having done the previous 3 albums, because they announced that rather early. They kept James Ford under wraps for quite a long time. And I actually remember seeing some photographs of the band with James Ford before they even made the official announcement, and it was still kind of 50-50 on whether or not for sure he was going to be producing the record. And they had been working on it for a while. This was the most secretive the band had been. And again, I think it's mostly because of the fact they had a new producer. But this is the I don't want to say secretive isn't the right word. This was the sort of the quietest down period that I remember from the band in quite a long time. But, usually you find out who the producer is, and then you get closer to getting details on the record, and they usually release sort of a first photograph of the band, in its current state. You get an updated picture of the band, taken within the course of the past few months. And then, of course, you get the details of the album, and then we end up getting the single, and then we get the album. So the way that I usually end up digesting a new Depeche Mode record is that when it comes out, I usually end up living with it for a while. And I was trying to find like an analogy to use, but there really isn't one. It's not like you're being introduced to a new friend. It's like maybe it's more like you're reconnecting with a friend that you haven't seen in a while, and maybe your friend has changed. But really, I end up spending a lot of time with the record. I listen to the record a lot. And usually zero in on a few songs, and I stick with it. And usually I will only listen to that new album up until and through we get around to the tour. And usually when we get around to the tour, I'll start listening to other records, other albums that I know that'll probably be covered on the tour, because they're not just going to play stuff off the new record. Although I hope this time around they actually end up playing more new tracks. I was really disappointed on the Delta Machine tour that they didn't play more tracks from Delta Machine, or at least by the time I saw them in Phoenix, they had stripped away several of the tracks. Although I did enjoy that particular tour. And then usually once the tour is over, I'll get back into my normal rhythm of listening to Depeche Mode, and there's certain albums that I'll end up gravitating towards more than others. And Songs of Faith and Devotion, Violator, those are usually the ones that I go to quite often. I think like a lot of us do, Some Great Reward. Oddly, and I think it's probably, if you took a poll of the fandom, Sounds of the Universe was one of the least well-received. I mean, certainly, it seems like most people really liked Playing the Angel more than Sounds of the Universe. But I'll tell you, Sounds of the Universe is one that I go back to a lot. There's a lot of tracks on that record that I don't particularly... No, I would say a lot. There are several tracks off that record that I don't particularly care for, but I do end up sort of gravitating towards Sound of the Universe more than I do any of the other recent releases next to Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion. Okay, so this is my setup to going back to what I said earlier, and that is if you haven't visited a particular album in a while, I would encourage you to do so. And the reason being is that, last week I told the story of a personal situation that I was going through, which, by the way, has worked itself out. And, once again, Depeche Mode helped me through that in listening to Precious and having that song take on new meaning to me. And for now, at least, unless it ends up applying to some other situation, and I don't think that it will based off of just how specific and sort of on the nose that particular song is, more so than other Martin Gore pen tracks. But, now I have another example of a song that got me through a difficult, period of time. And I just think that's cool. And again, it's another moment when Depeche Mode was there for me, when, there weren't other things that could be there in that particular moment. So I had another moment like this just recently. And it happened over the weekend. So I keep it's a CD wallet, right? You don't really see them much very often, but I have a couple of them, CD wallets. And I have it filled. I have one that's filled with all of the DVD and Blu-ray releases. All of the documentaries, the companion discs for the remasters, and then the concert videos, whether it's 101 or Devotional or the Live in Barcelona, and the Exciter tour. So I was basically just kind of binging on. I'd gone through a bottle of wine, and I was in a very melancholy mood. The situation that I've been referencing was still sort of in my mind, and I really wanted to watch some live Depeche Mode. And I decided I'd watched 101 recently, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. So I decided to put in the concert for the Exciter tour. Really, really like that particular concert, and I'll spend a podcast coming up in the near future talking about all the different concert releases, and we'll get into a bit of which tours I like more. But I liked the Exciter tour. I wasn't too thrilled with the visuals. So tough coming off of World Violation, and I still think it's a tragedy that we don't have a full live release from World Violation, because that tour was just so incredible. I still have bootlegs of that concert. Some really good quality soundboard stuff, and it still is so good. And then, of course, the Devotional tour, that stage setup was so epic and so amazing. Still my favorite concert video. The release was the Devotional tour shot by Anton. But I threw in Exciter, and it has some significance because that was the first tour that I ended up seeing several shows with my wife. It wasn't too long after we got married, before we'd had our kids, that we ended up seeing it. So threw it in, was really enjoying it. And I forgot, I just hadn't watched it in a long time. And honestly, I wasn't really thinking about it. About what the track list was. I just kind of threw it in, and it opens up with Dead of Night. And I went, oh yeah, I forgot that they opened up with Dead of Night. And I remember before that tour thinking that would be a good show opener, even though it really was an oddball song. That Dead of Night, and I need to spend some time talking about Dead of Night in the near future. That song, I really like that song, but boy, it sticks out. I mean, it really, when you talk about on the nose, that song really sticks out from other Depeche Mode material. I would love to be able to sit down with the band at some point and just go into a bit of, that particular song and the decision to put it on the record. Again, I like it, but it just was such a different track from stuff that they had done previously. But I forgot that the second song on that tour was The Sweetest Condition. And I really do. I really liked this song. I didn't think it worked as well live, but I really do like this song from Exciter. So again, I'm into my bottle of wine, and this song cranks up, and I just really let it kind of wash over me, and just listened to the lyrics, and suddenly I realized once again that here's a song that I hadn't visited in a long, long time that now had